with the podium format. At the end of the day, it's there's some messaging that came out. There's no doubt. There's a large number of people, but it ended up being an opportunity for our local grassroots constituents to voice their displeasure in all levels of leadership and governments. And unfortunately, we're the most accessible when it comes to those sorts of things. What we didn't get out of it was the opportunity to actually discuss the budget. It ended up being a large question and answer scenario for the public, and that is what it ended up being. One of the other things that I thought would have been very helpful was Yev's presentation was really good. I really enjoyed that presentation. I only wish that it could have been tied earlier to the beginning of our budget process, because then my committee meetings after there would have had something to tie to, as opposed to it being in its fullness at the end. And so there was a lot of light turning on moments after Yev's presentation for me. But as I looked at my watch in terms of the calendar, I was fearful that I ran out of time to discuss anything. And to me, talking with this group is the most important thing, as opposed to me sending Yev or Mike a bunch of emails. This is the forum that I prefer to discuss those things relevant to our area in terms of the budget. So that's my takeaway.
Okay, just to respond, because I chaired this. This was unprecedented. We have had small gatherings to discuss the budget previously. We've never seen a crowd this size, and we've never had a crowd vent as much as they did. So, number one, we weren't expecting that, and because it's never happened before, we were not prepared for that. I certainly value your comments, because it shows that we need to be prepared for things going a little differently than we have in the past. So that's part of my concern as well, that we consider doing things in a little different way than we have, because this may be how things develop in the future. And one of the things I had suggested to Chair Watson in my discussion with her is that when we have a crowd that has as much dissatisfaction as they did, and it's not just at our level of government, when they address us, it would be beneficial for there to be a moderator, because as they address us, it puts us on the defensive. We know what the RDCK is working towards, and what the staff desires, and through our meetings as directors, we have had those discussions been filtered through us. But there's a couple of concerns that I have right off the bat, and one is accurate information, because some of these people are there with information they have received through social media. At a meeting where we have people that have as many concerns as they did, very difficult to address that. And having a moderator there may be the way to help provide correct information without us as directors sounding like we are just defending ourselves and RDCK. And so someone who is unbiased yet has the knowledge to attend a meeting like that is something that I would find favorable.
Okay.
Yes, Arnie, I think you did a great job during the meeting, trying to control the anger. Yev did a wonderful job. He was certainly had a target on his chest there. Everyone was directing their anger at him as well as us. But yeah, and as far as some of the questions I had after the presentation, I was able to talk to Yev a couple days ago, and that cleared up a lot of things for me. Specifically, I was concerned about some of the increases in fire services, and I didn't understand, my own fault, I'm sure. Just how we have, juggled the budget to, try to reduce the impact of the larger ask than I was anticipating, and, so it was a good learning experience for me. Also had to talk with Gary, and he was very helpful in, explaining things to me as well, so. Yeah, that being said, what else can we look at here today that try to make improvements?
Round table? Sure, might as well. I should probably slide up too now that I've closed all my email stuff. Closer in a minute. There were two meetings there. So we had the normal element of the meeting, which was Debbie and others I recognized in the room that wanted to talk about the budget. And then we had another meeting supplanted on copyright. And so not much you can do about it. Yeah. I said, Arnie, we're in a public meeting. Compared to the moon, I said at the beginning, do not allow another microphone. So let's not hold any more meetings in a venue like that room where we can't control audio, period. That's a poor venue for audio. It's a poor venue when we have banquets and other stuff trying to speak. Let's not do that. It doesn't serve us as an organization. And then we control the audio. Yes, use the podium, only the podium, get up out of your chair, stand and talk. If it's that bigger room, that's what you just have to do. But considering there were two meetings going on simultaneously, the normal 5 to 15 people that might have been interested specifically in the budget, and then the other group that was coordinated to be there to tell us, not ask us, tell us things, that's fine. In terms of our discussion, we're not intended to have a chance ourselves, as directors, to have a conversation about the budget amendments at that meeting. That is to listen to the public. So I was fine with that as well. And I thought, I left at 8, maybe as you say, it was less orderly after 8 o'clock. But I left at 8 o'clock. But nothing you can do about having two simultaneous meetings, two completely different agendas. So not interested in debriefing it much more than that. If we need to make amendments in response to what we heard that night, I think it would be lopsided in our judgment, because I do not call a group like that a representative group of community. When you know from discussion that they had a pre-meeting and they came with their own microphones, they could deliver their own message. So I'm not changing very much of what I'm thinking today based on what I heard there. Much more meaningful input I had and Yev had would have been what we had in the Area A North meeting, where they actually wanted to explore items in the budget and ask, why did we do this and why didn't we do that? That's meaningful input to me. When people stand and tell me, I don't know if I heard it 5 or 6 times they're a nurse and they didn't get the same raise as someone else got, that's not meaningful budget input. That is spam. Because it's obviously not representative of the community as a whole. So anyway, we want to get on and do a few more changes to the budget here. I know where we can cut money. Reduce service. I didn't hear anybody in that room tell me specifically where to reduce service, and that's what I asked them to tell me. Nobody said cut the library. Nobody said stop the fire service or don't have road rescue. I didn't hear that. Not having heard that, I can still make recommendations where we can cut money. That's easy. The other thing that I did express this to Stuart and the board chair as well. We were tone deaf maybe the one message, the complete misunderstanding about this balance of stuff. Somebody kept hollering in the back, who's taking the profit? Who's getting paid? Where did the money go? Who took the money? And then when I saw another item of correspondence about a supposed forensic analysis of the budget, they noted that we have revenues through taxation and user fees with expenditures. And if you just cut off it, we paid the hydro, we did this, we did that, we fixed the plumbing. There's a difference. The difference is what we are continually now putting into reserve funds for capital asset management. And I think some people were misled and they came in and told, hey, you look, and this is $200,000 missing. It went somewhere to some reserve. Because those words were used as not slush fund, but there was strange language used in this forensic analysis. It's a complete fundamental misunderstanding of what's different about local government today than 10 years ago. We identified more than 10 years ago are tens of billions of dollars of infrastructure deficit. And the feds recognize it in the province. We have things like gas tax going back more than a decade. Then we recognize if we don't have our financial house in order with reserves, we're not going to get grant funding. So there's an educational point there that I think, as I say, I was a little bit blind to. Hearing these comments here and there, people were being told that we're taking money out of the pot and putting it somewhere, totally oblivious, naively oblivious to why we're doing that. That's something we have to clear up with people. We don't have to do that. We can forego grants. Say we're going to go bottom line budget every year. We don't need a penny, we won't tax a penny. And then when the roof leaks or something implodes or problem happens, we will hit you with a 5-year short-term borrowing and suffer through the pain. And that's that. We have to explain those as the options. Or we can say we will close the facility. Fernie shut the facility down. They had nowhere to go. They had no money. They were shut down. They had nowhere to fix it. Golden's had some real upsets in their budget. So there's another option. If you don't want us to budget for the inevitable major repairs, major issues, we won't. And then when we hit the wall, we shut down. And the employees, unfortunately, also have nowhere to work. So those are the reality options. But I heard nothing in terms of a articulate, well-articulated ask for how we should control our numbers. What I heard was spam. So I'm not looking forward to cutting any numbers, but if you want suggestions, yeah, we can cut what we give to external organizations. Cut all the cemetery contributions, which be in bad faith with one of our partners. We'll cut the library contribution. We can cut the airport contribution, which is again in bad faith to one of our partners, to the airport master plan. We can cut all of our discretionary funds. The biggest per capita being Area C, the second biggest Area A, and the more modest fund based on population, Area B. So you want a grandstand, let's cut all those to zero. The bottom line won't be much different. Short of that, I think it's irresponsible to start carving into the other budget. But let's look at them all.
Thank you. Through
My comment. Actually, go ahead, Director Vandenberg. I think it was you, wasn't it?
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd like to just jump right into it then. So one of my 3 questions will be, how do I determine how the money flows through the community halls through the budget? Where do I look for that? And that's just one of my don't know questions. But I do want to talk about the library, and I'll open it up by saying that now I'm looking at what was presented to us from the library in terms of their budget. And that which doesn't sit well with me or sits awkward with me is the request for funding from RDCK. And I know we talked about this, but there's a lot of capital and lease and that sort of thing. But I'm just going to cut right to the budget and say that one of the asks or one of the items in their budget this year is capital improvements project for $80,000. But down in their reserves, they have a capital reserve of $188,000. And they have an investments account of $200,000. Both of those last two, I've asked a number of times for a policy around how that money is earmarked and to be used. I'm kind of the opinion right now, and I can be talked out of it, that with $188,000 capital reserve budget, I don't see a need for an ask of $80,000 for capital improvements project in the budget, in their budget. And so that's how I look at that right now. I also should say that I've gone and looked at other libraries and understand that the municipal and rural contribution are somewhat separate, whereas in ours, it's all combined. but I've tried to pull out the municipal contribution and boil it down to what the rural contribution is. And I don't have a whole lot of time to be able to do this, but I just wonder why our library gets so much money compared to what I'm seeing elsewhere. And without these policies to say what this $388,000 is for, I'm having a hard time supporting a capital improvements project of 80 grand. And I'll just put that on the table.
So, in our Creston Valley Services, I agree, we haven't had a real accounting of how that money, could be used or saved, and, I'm wondering if there's anything that Yev could add to this to help us, with, the need to have and hang on to reserves of this size. So, Yev, is there something you could add?
Through Chair, maybe I'll defer that to Joe to talk about.
Yeah, through the chair, inside our budgets. So if we're only looking at regional districts, so just address the difference between the public library services and the regional district budgets. You'd have to look, so for example, the Nelson Library or the Castlegar Library, you'd actually have to look at their documents on their websites. Ours are strictly a contribution. So that when you see those, that's not the entirety of their budgets. In our process for the Creston Library, they are responsible for all of the capital work that is required in their lease space. So whether that be, I know that Craig and I have talked to them about, they're looking at changing their carpets, for example, out in there, possibly having to redo some of their book stacks and those kinds of things. So that is their responsibility, and you should see that in their budget. So that would be funded from their resources. Where they get those resources, though, may be partially from the regional district grant, but it could also be from donations to the library, and those kinds of pieces. So if that's not clear in there, I was just trying to find the background information on the Creston Valley Library budget, and I just can't find it in our files right now. That should be coming from their funding. Everything, the other piece, what makes this service unique is that we own the building. So the building envelope, the HVAC system, those kinds of things we've taken responsibility for maintaining and also providing capital improvements for. So Kelly, through to your question. So for example, we funded the replacement of the roof at the library, the parking lot upgrades. But what makes this service even a little more unique is that we actually have a regional district office in there as well. So sometimes there are costs that are actually associated with that office. If we, it might be better, or sorry, I'm not going to say better. That's not what I mean to say. But what we may want to do is have a workshop with the library board. I think that's something that's important. I actually can't remember the last time that we had the chair of the library board in. I know that we have had them at Creston Valley Services before. But the only problem, I'm just looking at Gary if he can recall, but like I would think it's at least been a couple years since we've had actually a representative of the board at Creston Valley, Services, which, you know, there really should be a relationship between the board and Creston Valley Service, not so much for CVSC to give direction, but that technically is the body that approves the library's budget that Sarah, as the chief librarian, then has to administer. And maybe we've been missing that conversation.
So if I may, Mr. Chair. So what I'm hearing is that there's a lease revenue line, there should be a lease revenue line item. This is owned by RDCK, the building. They are a tenant. So there should be some sort of an agreement and there should be reflected a lease revenue line item that helps to offset the capital expenses that RDCK is responsible for. So that's not in their budget. That's not what I can read here. So I don't know, I don't understand how this is set up. But to me, it's pretty straightforward. It's an asset owned by RDCK, and so then you have subleases, whether it be RDCK or library or others. And those should be line items of revenue attached. That those expenses to run the HVAC and the exterior of the building and so on and so forth should come off of that revenue line.
Chair? Comment on
Yeah,
that?
go ahead. Who's talking to me right now?
It's Garrett,
Okay,
Director Jack. And now you can see me on your screen.
I got you.
So we are a different model, unique, as Joe said. What Director Vandenberg is asking for would be a useful exercise if we wanted to give the library a reality check that they may consider being in a different building. Because not that many years ago, they weren't in a different building. They were in their own building. It's now one of the senior centers over the tracks. If you go down Port Street over the tracks, they used to be in that building, not a very nice facility. So if we wanted to have a longer term contribution or conversation around what is best for them in terms of they view their service delivery for the population in that area, we should be accounting for those values. We should say the building costs this much, and if you were to occupy this building and lease it, it would cost X. On a bigger scale, we are generous with the Creston Library. Some people have been hanging around for a while, and Joe would hear me say this. Previous library managers seem to be home deaf. They would say, well, in Grand Forks, they get this, and somewhere else they get this. They want more money. They always ask for more and more money. We, not Town of Creston, rural directors, sorry, four of us on the call, I realize, we rural directors are more generous than our colleagues are. E and F contribute, E doesn't contribute to Nelson Library. Areas F and H contribute, but 170,000 a year. And, they have a 10,000 population, that range. Areas I and J contribute to Castlegar, around $200,000, a little more generous than Nelson sees. And area I and J are contributing $200,000 a year based on about 8,000 population. Together, A, B, and C without town, in terms of the total cost of maintaining a building, the whole thing, is it's about $600,000 a year. So we're looking at revenue now. The rural areas contribute about just shy of 420,000. Now we peel 60,000 off and give it to our reading centers. So if you wanted to look at it, more focused, we maybe contribute about 360,000 across a population of some 8,000 people. The rural residents are twice as generous. If you wanted to be that harsh with supporting the central library housed in our building in Creston, we're twice as generous as rural residents are around Nelson and the rural residents are around Castlegar, without a doubt. To me, I've always been aware of that, even though we had a previous head librarian who would argue the exact opposite. And we got to the agree to disagree point. Now, how did we get there to be this generous, that we support the centralized facility? I think we've had some good conversations. Our library is a thing of the past. We've talked about that lots. Apparently not. Does this library support youth? Does it support all demographics? And we got conversation to the point that we even boost our contribution significantly to support their hiring a youth librarian who would focus on youth. So we've had a lot of conversations that got us into a generous position. So yeah, we can have a conversation about what's the building worth, because the people, the society who independently operate that service on our behalf should be able to weigh the options of moving somewhere else. And then we can also have the conversation, are the rural contributors too generous compared to other cities? And I would hate to have that conversation, because we work so well as municipal and rural integrated with so many of our shared services. But we could have that conversation. We could tear it all down and start talking about the lack of access of, for $20,000, we toss up the lake to Riandel, and $20,000 or shy of that, I guess, we toss up the lake to the East Shore Reading Center, and what we toss up to GAC. We could start saying this is inequitable and tear the service apart. That's called a service review. Or we have to sit down with the town and say, are we supporting this library beyond what seems reasonable, not as rural, but as a whole? And do we want to start cutting them back? If we're going to do that, and this is a public meeting, I realize, if we're going to do that, we need to have some resolve, some end game. Now, we do all kinds of studies for, do we need trails? Do we need parks? Do we need water access? Do we want indoor recreation? Maybe we need an assessment of the value of the library service before we start talking something radical. But yeah, we are generous. And I don't think it's being taken for granted right now by the population. And I think the vast majority of our clustered population for partners have good access to that facility, good hours of access. But I wouldn't want to cut an equal into that budget until I talk to constituents about it, a representative group of users, and then also anyone else. So any direction that the vote swings at the end of the day. But we have purposely supported that library more generously than what I've seen in other municipalities.
So
You had your hand up.
through the chair.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, so just so we're aware, so in 2022, the contribution to the Nelson Library from the city of Nelson was $694,787. I'm not, this is not justifying the library budget, just trying to put the conversation a little bit into context. The City of Nelson Library, like I don't know that budget in detail. That's, it's a contribution service, so that enables me not to have to review that in detail. But the City of Nelson Library is in a City of Nelson facility. That City of Nelson facility also houses the City of Nelson Police Force. So it's a shared building, and they've been looking for a new spot for a while now. But that is something. So the lease is essentially. The lease is not a matter of transferring money between the two. In particular, because libraries really primarily get their funding from two sources, the provincial grant and local government. And then there is this donation, local community support piece of it as well. But the vast majority of it comes from local taxation. I think this is part of what Sarah's been trying to it's also been communicating, and I've heard it from almost every librarian, is that the provincial grant piece has been much more stagnant than what the municipal contributions have been. So in this case, a number of years ago, so to what the history of the library is, it used to be in a building below the tracks. I think that's actually been demolished because that's how poor of condition it was in. And at the time, the local area directors actually worked quite hard with the province to negotiate the purchase of what is the present Creston Valley Library. The intent was never to get lease money back from the library. It was always considered that was part of the service was the building. So before, the service used to fund a very poor building that was in great disrepair. And the elected officials at that point in time, the strategy was that the regional district will maintain the building to ensure that it was maintained. I'll just go that far. And so the structure of the service was never about transfer. The lease agreement is essentially to describe what operating costs are theirs and what building and operating costs of that building are the regional district, and to transfer the appropriate amount of liability over to the library as it is a separate legal entity. So those pieces are what that lease agreement is intended to do. If there is a change to the way we want to do that, of course, we would endeavor to make that happen. So that's why you don't see like a lease, a revenue line coming in.
So Director Vandenberg, does that answer your questions?
Yes, it does help. Thank you very much. The lease agreement I haven't seen. I don't know what is there to be understood. This particular library is getting that position of that capital asset rent-free with some understanding of capital improvements of some sorts, which would be in the lease agreement, which I don't know what it is. Director Jackman has pointed out that through a process of evolution, this library has been given appropriate funds to make it as good as it is today. And I can appreciate that. If you want a motion, I'm compelled to make a motion that the funding for 2024 match the funding for 2023. So specifically, from what I can see on S193, the 2023 budget was $566,000 and change, and I propose that the 2024 match that. And we do need to have future conversations around this because when it comes to that equitability around the region, we need to understand what our constituents are getting for their dollars in and around the region, and we got to be careful about isolating our area to make it different than the levels of service that others are getting elsewhere. So that future conversation and analysis would be welcome from my end. So that's my motion.
So, Chair, I think we need more detail, or staff obviously needs a little more than that, because that would be rolling back about 29,600, 700, something like that. Where we made adjustments in other line items between 23 and 24 is we increased the grant allocation amount by 22,000. So if you're going to roll back the requisition by 29.7, are you going to roll back the grant by that full amount? Are we going to roll back the grant by all or some of the 22,000? Are we going to offset the rest of it with contribution to reserve, reduction in reserve? We need to give direction to staff. What line items are going to be impacted once we reduce the requisition by almost $30,000? The other approach is that you maybe just say that we will reduce or roll back the allocation in the grants, the line item of the grants only, to the prior year. So from 490,939 to go back to 468. Then there's still another direction to staff. Does that mean that only one of the 4 facilities that receive money out of that line item would have that reduction of $22,000, or do we prorate and reduce the funding to all of those facilities, all of those societies?
right?
But I'd start with that line item, not the requisition, give that direction to staff, and then staff can adjust the requisition at the end.
Yeah, if I could through the chair, it's much easier for staff to work with specific expense line items being changed, and then we just use the requisition as the offset. But if you say the requisition is the offset, then the requisition's gone up more, for example, than the grant to the Creston Valley Library. So we're gonna reduce requisitions by the 29,000 that Director Javin mentioned, but I think the grant's gone up by 22. So we're gonna have a $5,000 gap somewhere that we're not gonna have direction to make that change. So we just need a little bit more on the expense side, and then we can balance it with the requisition.
Thank you, and if the chair will indulge me, this is a learning session. I would take that piece of that suggestion and suggest that we roll the grant line back from 490, almost 491,000 to previous year of 468. It's not been seconded, so
I'll second that for discussion. It's completely disingenuous not to second it. I'll second the discussion.
Okay.
And can I ask a question, Chair of Joe? Do you recall through the chair, did we boost the reading center allocations as part of that $490,000?
Through the chair, no. The reading centers in 2023 and 2024, Crawford Bay is 20, Ryandale 20, Yak 15.
So they've been red circled for some years as well. But thank you.
And through the chair, so in the 5-year plan, they are flat. Usually usually the commission is giving me, the committee is giving me specific direction when we want to see those increased.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion before I call the question?
Well, just maybe if I can, Chair, to clarify that we would not touch the 2020 given to the three small societies, because they've already, as I say, been redlined or flatlined for several years. The last time they get a boost, it was me filibustering saying they needed a boost.
right, and through the chair, I am speaking specifically to S193.
They're all the same. Yep. They're all the same.
Okay, so it's not my intention to speak beyond what I am starting to understand. That being the local Creston Library.
Okay, I would call the question then. All in favor? From here, I only see, okay, I see 2 hands up. So, I guess I would have to cast a deciding vote as chair. Is that
No,
correct?
we're a committee of 4. Are you calling for opposed, Chair?
Pardon? Yes, I would call for a vote.
I'm opposed. We haven't had enough conversation with the users.
Oh,
Okay, so then we're a committee of 4. That would mean that I would have to cast a vote, and I too am opposed to that.
So it fails.
And the reason I'm opposed is I really think that before we start making these decisions, based on a group of people putting pressure on us, we haven't measured the group of people that are in favor of this as a budget line item and why they are in favor, for one thing. And secondly, we really haven't had we need to have a report from our librarian and perhaps a chair as to what their plans are with these reserves. So we know why they're doing it, what they need out of it before we start thinking about making cuts this far into our budget section. So I see us not leaving this alone, but I just don't agree with this as a method of finding cuts to a budget after a meeting of pressure from one group. Struck me today that politically, we all learn to say the right things or try to. It's harder to learn to do the right things. Doing the right thing means considering a balance of what all your constituents want. And I don't think we've done that. I think we've listened to a group that are angry. But when you look at the size of that room, and consider there's over 14,000 people living in the regional district that we are all representing, that's not a representation of everybody's desires. It's a representation of a group. And we had no way of even measuring how the entire room felt. We had a way of measuring how the vocal people felt without measuring how other people felt that were in that room. So I just don't think that we're ready to make those decisions, Director Vandenberg. That's the reason I'm opposed to it.
And through the chair, I respect your decision for sure. I will say that none of what I'm seeing here today is a result of Wednesday. This is the short time frame for this whole budget process, and trying to figure out where that we can start asking these questions to do with increasing or decreasing the budget, and trying to figure that out as a new person is what I'm doing. And I'm not afraid to suggest that we need to meet and talk about these things, because I'm trying to figure out when in the course of the year I can input to be more prepared next time for the budget season. So I'm not afraid to push on this. So that's what I'm doing. And once again, I do respect your point of view, but know that I'm fiscal conservative and I care about where the money is being spent and for what reason. And I'm trying to be equitable in my approach.
And I've seen that ever since I've known you, and I respect that as well. Joe.
Sorry, through the chair. You know, I was trying to remember what Sarah's, like, it's because there's this question about that $80,000. Is it possible if I could share my screen and just provide, I think, like I'm not, it's not justifying the decision that was just made. I just think we just want to look at it so that we're all under the same understanding.
Fair enough. And, you know, before we had this conversation, when we were still in the debrief, one of the things that I think we really need to do before these public meetings is have a list of frequently asked questions and answers to them, so they don't have to be all answered at a meeting where we're trying to progress with our information. As we did with our climate change action strategy, frequently asked questions can be put on the website or distributed prior to a meeting, and it may help us, at least help some people get informed. So I really think that's another strategy we need to employ here. Go ahead, Joe. I see your.
Yeah. So is that? Can everybody see that? All right.
Yeah, that's what I happen to have up on my screen, and that's what I've been referring to.
Yeah, and you know, and I can understand what you're. So sorry for the informality, but Kelly, we're looking at this 80,000 and wondering if we're funding it from that 435 that we provided the library. Is that correct?
Well, it is, but that is they're earmarking 80 grand to spend on this next year. Meanwhile, they have if you scroll down to the bottom of your page, they have 388,000 in their reserves available to them.
Yeah,
and I believe that's non-tax dollars.
Yeah, through the chair, and yeah, I see that as well. What's interesting is, in a way, they are. Now, I would suggest that they're not showing the bottom particularly well, or else I don't understand their budget. So there's definitely is a conversation around here. But where they're funding that 80 is from this $100,000 carryover. Where that $100,000 carryover actually comes from is this $210,000 donation up here. And I remember Sarah saying something about this. So I don't know. So this 210 creates this revenue, this 742. They spent the 601. They're net 140 down here. They're bringing 100 of that up here, which seems to be funding this. She would be the better person to ask, but it seems then that that's also helping fund some of the operational piece. So what What I don't see in this piece is that that's funding, that our contribution is funding this. What she did speak about was that they were going into union negotiations and that it's a little bit about this inflation down here, this 421. So that's what I remember. But what I don't see from their numbers is that they're using our operating grant directly to fund their their capital improvements. But I do agree that when I look at this piece, some of this maybe isn't presented in the same way that we would. So I definitely agree that you may want to have more conversation. But I do just want to, sounded like to me that part of the conversation was that we thought that we may be funding their capital. I don't see that in what they've presented so far. Stop sharing.
That'll be a little bit more clearer next time.
Could I add a little bit, Chair? My understanding is the capital is largely the flooring replacement.
Right.
Was targeted, and that's their responsibility under the lease agreement. And this donation is not untethered money. It has limitations where they have to spend it. And it's one time and it's exceptional that amount of money. And then the other exceptional amount of money that landed on them was the provincial boost, which they can't rely on in future years. So I don't think they have ever had this kind of reserve balance in this amount of reserve balance in their history. This is an overlapping of the province saying, here's more money. Happens to be an election year. I'm not going to speak to that. We're not here to talk politics, but that is a fact. And they got an exceptional donation. Future years, hard to predict what they're going to have. My preference is to either have conversations in more detail prior to significant cuts or changes in direction. Or we would have had a conversation earlier about our targets, whether we were going to support the 6.2 inflation. They didn't ask for 6.2, I think it was 5.5. Whether we were going to set ourselves our own local target, or where we would rather see the inflationary pressures on local government taxation be capped or work towards some number. Because most of our conversations have been working around that 6.2. This service is less than that. I think it's about 4.5% across the board, which of course breaks out as 0, 0, and 0 increase for the 3 small reading centers, and about a 5.5% increase for the one society.
Thank you. It's a 7% on the expenses side. It's a 7% increase.
Because some our other factors create the rest of that. We can cut the contribution to reserve here and now and not impact any of the service delivery. We just have to deal with that down the road. We can make other changes in our budget without impacting the direct service delivery budgets for reading center library operators. But then we have to atone for that later. We start cutting back our reserves. We haven't finished our capital asset management plan for this building yet. We don't know what the correct number is for theoretical reserve contribution.
So I look forward to future conversations in and around this, and do wish to see these policies, because I expect something different for the next budget season. So we had better start having these conversations to better clearly understand what our expectation is and what the level of services that we wish to see in our sub-region. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for indulging me on that. At this point, I only have one other area that I wish to discuss, and I certainly would like to take my turn. But if you would indulge me.
Yeah, I can certainly indulge you. I don't know if the other directors have any items, so we'll circle back to them, and I will indulge you, and then go ahead, Director Vancourt.
And I think it's more of a clarity point, and it's around S240 is the airport. And the bump there, I think, represents the intended master plan that, is contemplated to be done. I'm in favor of that master plan. That airport should be an economic development driver. And I think it's been resting on its laurels, for a number of years. It hasn't looked at the airport from an economic driver point of view. And from my point of view, representing the taxpayer money from Area C, it needs to be. And it needs to happen starting this year. And if there's not a good economic development revenue generating plan that comes out of this, I don't see the value of supporting this airport. It's never going to do anything more than what it does. And from my understanding, it's just a great place to have your airplane because it's inexpensive. I also understand that while Creston gets a tax revenue from those hangars and so on, RDCK does not. And so my investment from Area C needs to show a economic benefit to Area C residents, taxpayers. And so that's my thought again on the airport. And just to confirm that the bump in the requisition is to cover that very important master plan.
And
Go ahead.
through the chair, that is correct, two pieces. So in 2024, as per direction, that was 30,000 for the master plan and 15 in 2025. So, but there was, so in 2023, the grant was 201,775. In 2024, the budget has 208,635. So it is two pieces. Just for clarity, it's not just the 30,000.
Okay, speaking from the town of Creston point of view, and someone who I did sit on the Airport Society for 4 years, there's a couple of things there. Of course, the need for a master plan is pretty apparent. The master plan that is in place now is ancient, and it's really not detailed to the point where it should be at this after having it there so long. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, because we've had a society there for many, many years, doing basically the same things without a master plan, there's a complacency there that if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And so that's been the mentality there. They have managed the airport, but they haven't really put thought into the progressive things that we know they need. Other than they do need to spend money on runways. If they want to have as an economic driver, they have to be able to land and turn around larger planes, as in the size of Dash 8s and larger. They know that's a high expense. Again, the master plan will probably support that. They still need decent running water. The wells they've drilled have not given them access to good water there. And again, that's a barrier to development. So that's all important. The other thing is the lease revenue from hangars is surprisingly low because there's not a high cost for those leases, and the master plan, of course, would probably support a radical increase in that. So that we do have a long way to go. Having finally getting the funding for this master plan will make that difference, and I think that will again make us all feel like our contributions are meaningful and progressive. So I hope that gets done, and I think we all know, as you've said, the potential for economic development to our valley with having an airport that is a bit of a step above what it is now would be huge. And so I want us to keep working in that direction. But as per, if we do get the funding to complete a master plan, which is relatively expensive, to guide us, I think we'd all feel quite justified in moving forward with the cost as to what the benefits of us investing in it more would be. So I don't know what else to tell you other than that, and I hope that all comes to fruition in the next year or two or 3.
So Comment, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So, and you don't have quite the historical backlog. I brought in a few of my old financial plans over there. There's two missing out of the batch, and I was trying to figure out what I would have been doing there somewhere else, but we did give this, service a major lift. In 2021, the taxation was 138, or 138,000. The grant was 136,700. In 2022, the grant was 139,100. 2023, we jumped 200,000. So we did a huge jump in this grant. I'm just trying to recall, because we had conversations about revenue potential back then. They could have an upgraded fueling station to make money off of fuel. They were broke. They needed to just move forward, get their cart dispenser or whatever they had to make fueling easy for pilots and stuff like that. And I'm not sure if that was most of the reason we gave that major lift, but we gave a major lift to that group a few years ago. But you would have heard when they came and sat and presented, of course, they're in transition, who's going to be looking at the books, has to be questions about fuel revenues. It doesn't seem like we saw any significant increase in fuel revenues. I don't know, Joe or anyone else recall any other details, but we gave them a large lift. Part of it was so that they could, keep their equipment up to date, their plow and other issues they had problems with. But also part of it so they could invest in revenue generating improvements like fuel dispensing. So in light of that huge recent lift, this is one where I think the impact of discussing change to what's on the page right now for this service would be less, I would think, than the library. Library is far reaching, impacts thousands of people. This service impacts medevac, which is very important for everybody. But for the most part, it impacts a much smaller group of people across the valley. So I don't know if anybody wants to look at that closer. Of course, the grant line this year looks huge at 239, but that is because the regional district will grant back that money to the town who will do the master plan. Now carve out is 40,000 of it or something in that order. But if you look at recent history, we increased this service contribution by $60,000 a couple of years ago. So I don't know if we want to have a conversation about that. We got out of it. Is it stabilized the organization? Has it made a difference? Do we have a full accounting of where that money went and where it's going to go in the future? I don't know. They did give us some reserve monies, but I don't recall them offhand. Some reserve figures, numbers.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, through the chair, Gary's pretty much correct. The big increase was to ensure that at the time Bob Kitching had presented that how underfunded their capital replacement plan was. So that was the intent of that increase, was to make sure that they were properly planning the replacement of their capital assets. So that was the primary reason for that increase. I was just going through our Creston Valley Services committee stuff just to try and find Bob's budget report. I just can't locate it right now.
I got it.
So through the chair, if I may, is this a matter of confidence in the current governance structure? And it's not the current one, it's the past. How do we communicate the need for concern towards our investment dollars via the grants into this society organization? How do we get the message across that we expect a return on our dollars? And knowing that we've committed to funding, master plan, which will, hopefully produce for us, an array of activities or opportunities, maybe even touching on, how the governance needs to be put in place for the future as well. I don't know. But from based on what I'm hearing, we have invested, extra dollars, into a service that has not gotten us a return. So how do we hold that responsible?
I would say we either invite them to Creston Valley Services, or we attend one of their society meetings with this on the agenda, so we can have that fulsome discussion. I do know some of the things that they've done with their money is infrastructure, roads and parking lots, have been a muddy mess, and I think they've done some upgrades in some of those roads. And it was getting to the point where an ambulance was having difficulty accessing where the air ambulance parked. So I believe they've done some work there. So some of the stuff is infrastructure improvements that have been long overdue. But they have been remiss in not having a solid capital replacement plan. And I don't know how much they put into evaluating their assets and things like that. So we've tried to wake them up to that. And in order for us to have given them an increase in budgets or giving them any extra money, we asked for a plan. They did come to us with a updated plan, I think 2 years ago, and they'd fallen behind quite a bit in what they were getting and what they were hoping for, because they didn't really have a way to justify it. So they're doing that more, and I think we need to keep pressing them for that, because again, our return on investment has to show that it's having a positive benefit for the valley. And they've just
So through the chair, Arnie, I would ask then if you chose to reduce their grant transfer, by some dollars for this budget session, is that an eye opener enough?
well, one of the things they've just done is they've selected a new chair, so they are again trying to start again with some setbacks. I don't know how much that will change what they do, but reducing their grant request by a certain amount, they send a message, but again, it interferes with some of the plans that they have in place now. And we're still, again, looking to complete the request for the master plan funding. We haven't done that yet, so I don't know how to answer your question other than I think we need to sit with them and just have this whole discussion before we start put things on the chopping block, unless you really strongly feel we should have things on the chopping block already.
So I would propose to make a motion that we reduce the grant by 10%, less the money allocated to the master plan. And yeah, it might be a little, and I think that ends up being like $18,000 or $17,000. But I think that is a wake-up call, and for that reason. So that would be my motion.
Okay, for discussion purposes, I would request someone second that motion.
Chair, I can speak to the budget, because I'm just looking at the budget right now for the lot, like the airport that they actually provided, and the master plan is actually not in here as an expense line item, unless it's buried somewhere and they haven't noted it.
Stu,
So they're
the town is funding it. That's a
Yeah,
grant
that's
to the
what I
town.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a grant through the town, okay. So right now they're showing a $2,500 loss with the grant of $208,000 based on regular operations.
And I have to update you on one other thing. When we did our Ready grant request a couple of years ago, I believe it was 2 years ago, they had a grant request for almost the lion's share of that amount. So they had a plan in place for that money and a request for the money. It was a flat no from us because of how large a grant that would have been. So they had plans that could not proceed because they did not get that grant, and that made them more reliant on the funding that they get from the town and from RDCK. So I don't recall exactly what their plan was for that, but I don't think that eliminated that plan. It eliminated the funding for that plan. And so if we're reducing funding again, I'm not sure what the impact will be, but it would be a setback for them. That's all I can say.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't see a seconder, so I don't know that my motion is standing at this point.
The chair,
The chair did
The
say.
chair seconded? Okay.
so, Chair, some thoughts from me.
Okay.
I prefer not to use 10%. If we can use a easy round number, and so if the prior year grant was in the order of 202,000, when we call it $20,000 reduction, easy to track, because you can see that big difference. And then, it's $20,000 reduction in the grant to the Airport Society. Doesn't impact the town's work. They had projects that were very ambitious. I worked on airport construction for 13 years. I know you don't want to hear this again, but I spent a few $100 million oversight of a group of 12 engineers and professionals running multiple projects simultaneously for years. So some of the things they talked about was like the turnaround to attract some other aircraft. They were out of reach and don't make sense. They're out of time and out of reach, out of sequence and out of reach until you do a master plan. So yes, they've had past projects, as the chair has stated, that didn't come to fruition. They didn't get grants, and probably because they didn't have a plan, period. So that just states once again that there may be other sources of funding, but you're not going to get any of it without a proper plan. Now, one of those other sources of funding could well be us, still through community works. You know, a well-defined, reasonable, incremental improvement that makes sense to all of us, that will provide some return on investment, whether it's reliability on medevac, or whether it's some other business operation that might be a startup and bring revenue into the valley. We could look at funding that through community works funds. So this is a kind of operation I'm not worried about us putting it in jeopardy necessarily. I think we would just be changing focus. That if they have a project that needs to be so well defined, we would say meet the bar, community works fund, gas tax fund, as opposed to just being part of the general budget. So I don't use this kind of adjustment, because I know there's other paths to funding some of the things they need to do. It just has to be done in a more a better defined, justifiable route, instead of just having a general budget that they can spend or not spend. So I don't see this as harming the long-term operation of the airport. We have other paths to fund them.
So I'm prepared to amend my motion to reflect a round number of 20,000. I believe I would still need a seconder to support that.
Or it's a friendly.
I think it could be friendly. It's close enough to 10% that it could be a friendly. Yeah.
Okay, so if that's okay, then that's what the motion would be that we're standing right now. And for the chair's benefit, Stuart is making his way out of here because he does have another meeting to attend right away. And then Joe and Craig are the bosses.
This is completely off topic, but I do have, it's because it's not on the motion, but I do have a suggestion if there was anything else you're looking at. Unfortunately, it does not impact Area A, but S108 is carrying about $160,000 plus surplus over into 2024. That surplus was being used gradually because we didn't know what was going to be happening with the Cooney Employment Services contract. If you wanted to use $40,000 to $50,000 of that surplus to further reduce taxation, it might come back with a lift in 2026, but not until then.
Okay.
So if you want to take a look at something like that, 40 to 50 would probably not put you too much bring too much of a bind for the next couple of years, but it might, depending on how the renegotiation for the KES contract is and what those dollars look like later on. Be something else you want to consider in this meeting. Sorry to speak out of turn with the motion.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Tierney.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My concern about reducing the airport budget by 10% is that we're not hearing from them. We don't know what the impacts would be. We don't know what they're planning to spend their budget on this coming year. And, yeah, just concerned, that this may be looked at a negative way by them. I mean, I know it's a wake-up call, but, you know, I think we have a responsibility to consult with them. We had that chance. They were at our Creston Valley meeting not long ago. Nothing was brought up about this. And, so I would be going opposed to it.
Any other discussion on this?
Yes, through the chair, there's been ample opportunity to come to the table with some fresh and new ideas. It's been chosen not to. So it tells me that the opportunity for the leadership to reset is both physically happening and through a reduction in their funding, mentally would seek that opportunity to improve. So I will be supporting my motion further because I think it's necessary.
Yeah, I'll call the question then. All in favor of the motion?
I'll support it.
Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain.
Cannot, sir, if you're in the room, you vote in the affirmative.
Okay. You know, Kelly, can I ask for further discussion? No.
So, Director
Okay.
Tierney, what-
I vote for, I'm not abstaining. I'm not, voting against them.
Okay, so basically the motion is carried then, is what I'm taking it. We have enough support to carry that motion. And it reads then that we are reducing funding by $20,000, is that correct?
Yes, that's, I believe, is the motion.
Okay, and in doing so, that's distributed equitably between the different area A, B, and C. I know there's different percentages there, correct?
Yes.
Through the chair, the service isn't built that way, so it just reduces the requisition and it's based upon whatever the assessment is for this year.
Okay, so that would have to go to a board for approval tomorrow, wouldn't it?
To amend the financial plan, yeah.
Okay, well, we have a direction there that a decision was made here, so I guess we'll get the board then tomorrow. Director Tierney or Jackman, are there other items you wanted to discuss?
I have a couple. The one chair is on this same item. If the board does approve this budget amendment tomorrow, then could there be a direction to staff to ask Manager Kirko to contact the Airport Society to let them know what we've done and to indicate that the committee may be able to support specific capital improvements through the coming year through grant funding, through separate grant funding. Or if the manager doesn't think that's his job, he'll have to be one of us. Any chair to move.
Through the chair, I can definitely communicate what the decision was.
Okay.
Any other item, Director Tierney?
Just want to wait.
Yes. Wait. Given that we, there's room there, Why should we want to make the motion, but, for 2024, motion that the budget be reduced by 40,000.
And then the planned, surplus moving into 2025 would be reduced by the same amount. Operating surplus would be reduced by the same taxation.
I would second that.
I'm not clear exactly what the motion is, so repeat it.
Motion would be to reduce the budget for S108
Requisition.
sorry, by $40,000 for 2024.
And is that reserves?
No, that would be reflected in a reduction of the prior year surplus by $40,000.
Okay.
For 2024?
Yes, both on 2024 line item.
Yev has his hand, and I seconded it, and Yev, Mr. Chair, Yev has his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that would be a reduction in the accumulated operating surplus rather than the prior year surplus.
Oh, sorry, it would have, yes, yeah. Going into next year, yes.
Yeah, so a reduction of the accumulated operating surplus by 40,000 and then a reduction in requisition by 40,000.
Line 59,100.
Yeah.
Which next year becomes a prior year.
Yes, or part of the prior year.
It's a reduction in accumulated operation surplus as opposed to, I'm just writing this
Change, really?
or, say that again, Yev?
That the board directs staff to reduce the accumulated operating surplus expense by $40,000 and reduce the requisition by $40,000 in service S108.
Okay. We had a seconder by Director Vandenberg. If I
Yes.
recall correctly. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
I'm not a participant, so.
Yeah, well, I'll vote in favor of this one as well, reluctantly, but I will vote in favor. So that I would believe we carry it. And Yev, your hand is still up. Is there another comment?
Oh, sorry, Chair, I'll remove that.
Okay, thank you. I guess one of the things that came about because of last week's meeting is the putting on notice that taxes have gone up more than people wanted to, at least a group of people, and we have to consider that and consider ways that we can at least moderate or reduce the rate our taxation is going up by applying it to the different services. And I know that's a discussion that you dearly want to have with Director Vandenberg, but it's something that I can take away from these type of meetings is that there is a strong group that are lobbying. Before we make all those decisions, we have to just make sure that it's in line with what not only those people want, but others want. And so in having that discussion, I think we have to make sure that that message goes to people that there is that desire, but is it shared by enough people to make that fully justifiable for us to make any radical move?
Come through the chair, once again, thank you for that, and yes, that is foremost in my mind, that I am representing a larger area in this decision making.
Can I bring up one other topic?
Yep.
So I observe all the line items for my services and all the key items like requisition and changes for all the services. It's been a habit over the last 15 years. And something we haven't talked about, but we can, and I think that maybe we should as a whole, is we have a service called discretionary grants for each of us. If you want to track back Area A, you'll find that Area A has been flatlining again for several years. Since, when was the last bump? For the last 4 years, I guess. And it's staying at the same amount, even though there's 5 community halls, numerous societies, lots of demand from a growing population of 2,240 plus the summer bulge. If you look at all of our discretionary grants and compare it to population, the director for Area B is looking for less money, much larger population, fewer halls, but lots of societies and other groups. But you're taxing your people for the discretionary fund, essentially a lower rate per capita and certainly lower rate per assessment. Area C is taxing at one of the higher rates per capita and per assessment. My personal observation, recognizing observer is recording this meeting again, because I look at these things and I say, well, where is the money going to? Is it going to one group or hundreds of groups or dozens of groups? In Area C, a great deal of that discretionary funding went to the West Creston Hall project. Now, all of us, when you're using discretionary money, have to be very careful. We're taxing people for money with our discretion and tends to hold at the board. We make recommendations, rarely debating. There's a few I've seen that have kicked back, but the board not allowed. So if we are looking for ways to relieve the tax burden, then we seriously need to consider how the discretionary funds are being used. It is the amount appropriate. Area C proposing $41,500 taxation for discretionary of 2/3 of the population of Area A taxing $25,000. And Area B in the middle there taxing $30,000, a much larger population. Those are things that we can voluntarily reduce, and nobody in the board will reject that if we say we have had more money than we needed. And if you actually did the homework and look where that was spent, was say an Area C discretionary fund spent for all people across all areas, or did it tend to lean in favor a community hall or a group, or a smaller geographic segment? We should all be responsible and aware of how that money is being spent. Pretty easy for me with 5 community halls, the southerly one located 80 kilometers from the most northerly one, because I span the full 2,000 plus people pretty easily every time we allocate money back and forth. But if anybody wanted to roll back their fund, I do recognize that Area C did drop their discretionary funding for a year because there was a massive surplus accumulated because of the very high rate of money taxed. But that's something we can all give pause to. Does anyone want to reduce their discretionary fund for 2024? I do not. And then do we also want to be more careful about how we use our community development funds? Our community development funds, which are PILs, payments in lieu of taxes from the province, fundamentally were designed to offset taxation. The province's way of saying, we're not going to be taxed on our facilities, our property, our infrastructure, because we don't want to be subjected to lower government taxation, but we will give you a payment in lieu of taxes. And if in fact they were taxed, that would have offset the taxes of everybody else. And yet all of us, including myself, tend to sometimes use community development funds for new and emergent issues, fund something different that was not part of our responsibility under our tax structure. We're not using those funds to offset taxation. I think Area B is probably the most faithful to that philosophy, if you actually analyze all those things, and I do. So there's something else, maybe not any use for this year, but for next year. Are we using those funds as the province fully intended us to use them? And there was a huge conversation about this when I was an alternate director, so that's 18 years ago. But those are 2 areas, if we really wanted to be fiscally a little more responsible, we should all scrutinize. I'd rather the board have a conversation, or maybe RAC should have the conversation, because rural directors tend to have more of those funds. not every municipality has a discretionary grant fund allocation. Anyway, those are spots where I'd like us to scrutinize next year. See if we can do better, or if anybody wants to change the number today, I guess this would be the time to do it.
And in fact, I think, sorry, Gary. Yeah, and through the chair, and in fact, that's on my list is because, yeah, the mechanism for discretionary funds, for those funds, last year I did convert my balance back to the tax. My intent was to do the same this year, but I didn't quite understand where the mechanism was and when it was, but I guess it's, who do I have these things happen? Other than obviously sending a note to my CAO, which I don't even remember last year how it was done. But yeah, that is my intent.
You would do it here and now.
Here and now, and what I didn't recognize is the amount that, the rate in which the money is being collected in Area C being higher than typically A and B. I didn't recognize that till just now. Didn't pay attention to that, still fairly new into it. And so I would want to have a discussion on getting that, because I'm ending up with a balance and I'm very frugal when it comes to people asking for those funds. And there's a number of items that they need to present to me. The major one is what membership is this benefiting? And I've said no a number of times now. But to that end, I would like to, with Stuart not being in the room, who do I reach out to adjust my discretionary grants balance? And have that further conversation about impending taxation for 2024.
It says 262, I think, for you.
Go ahead, Yev.
And you'd have to make the change right now, because it has to be before board tomorrow, but it won't change.
That's 260. How did it happen for me last year? How did somebody give me the opportunity to consider that?
Maybe I brought it up, sir.
Maybe you did?
I don't know. And I'm sorry, 262 is area B, S263 is area C. You zero balance, zero budget last year, and you're in for 41,453 this year. And you will have a projected surplus on top of that, 74,000 coming in this year.
Yeah, part of my strategy was to wait for the referendum to go through around the fire hall. But if my call is for 41,000, I would want to say right now, I know you have your hand up, that I would want to see half of that is based on what I'm able to provide to the community. I think that 20,000 for requisition for 2024 is adequate. So I see that Yev's hand is up.
Go ahead, Yev.
Okay, through the chair, just to clarify, so yes, so the recommendation can be made at this meeting. And that there is currently 74,738 sitting in 263 as a prior surplus that hasn't been distributed yet. So just to clarify, would you like that to remain and add another 20,000 to that as your requisition?
Right. Thank you for that. Because I don't have the numbers in front of me. I would want to cut the 74,000 in half and redistribute it back to Ken.
No.
Oh, so once I have a balance, I'm stuck with the balance, although it doesn't sound kind of come up right. The 74,000, how do I get to distribute that? Can I refund that back to taxpayers?
Not easy.
Not easily. Well, then I don't want I want zero increase. If I'm sitting at 74 and I can't refund that back, then I don't want to be taking any more for 2024. So zero. Does that work yet?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, that'll work. So we'll have a motion to direct staff to reduce the requisition in S263 for 2024 to zero,
Yeah,
and to reduce the grants by 41,453.
right. And then I still end up with that 74,000 balance. Is that correct? Do I understand that?
Correct,
Correctly?
yes. So you'll have that 74,738 available.
And for me to disperse that, I actually have to grant it out? Okay, I'm getting a nod yes from Gary.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess that's still, I think I'm okay with that.
Okay, I guess because we're in the board, we're in the meeting, we still need a seconder for that. I know that's your desire, but you need a seconder, I assume.
I
In the right direction.
second that motion.
Further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, I guess that, did that pass with the, 2 votes, or do we need a third vote?
Roger, did you vote?
I didn't vote because, or I didn't vote in favor because I think there's a lot of community organizations, youth groups, community associations that we really are making a difference in a small way of supporting. And, so I'm not in favor of reducing my own allocation. And I don't feel it's my place to go to
If I might procedurally, Chair, yes, this only impacts one participant, it's single participant. And because there's only one participant, we all vote on it. You can't have a vote yourself. If there's one participant, all in the committee or board vote on that. If there's 2 or more participants and it's participant only, then the participants vote. We're in committee, we're not in board. If we're in board, we would all vote weighted, but we're not. But it is appropriate for us to vote on the director's recommendation, just so it can be formalized to move forward, since he's the only participant in that service.
So that's, I suppose, the fact that he made the motion, I should, vote in favor of his motion.
In all that, I still have a balance of balance. And I can still serve to those intentions that you bring forward, because I do agree with you. I just don't need to have this $100,000 discretionary grant account. Then I'm just finding out that I have to then allocate that out. And I'm holding back, I'm taking taxpayer money to do it. I would rather have the taxpayers have their money back. And I'm still okay with being able to provide that level of service to some of those groups at the current balance that I have.
And through the chair, yeah, it's a really good lesson today. I didn't realize a number of what the information Gary was providing to us. And yes, I see your point. And agree that your decision for your area is appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes then.
Gary, do you have any more opportunities for discussion?
So I apologize, I blindsided you with that one. I thought I was gonna chat about it first, but
It was actually on my, because I didn't know the timing for it, but so thank you for that. I do have one more thing if you guys would like to indulge me, and it's just a clarity question on S105.
City Parks?
That is community sustainability.
Oh,
Maybe this isn't the proper form.
no questions.
But I've got the audience, so. And specifically, it refers to line item 54030, contracted services. And the thing that jumps out to me on the 2024 budget is an expense item of $152,000. But in following preceding years and following years, it never exceeded 20 grand. I don't understand at this point what the 152,000 is earmarked for.
Chair, I think I know what that is. First, we can make a recommendation on any service the board has to approve. Theory. Kind of awkward, but it would, in this case, I think we are taking over the management contract for the farm advisors. We were moving it, it's over 3 regional districts.
Oh,
And I think we're shifting, I think it's our turn, I haven't found the service yet. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
It's the
I think
advisory.
we're shifting who goes into grant funding, CBT, and all the other contributions from the other regional districts and then administers that, but I think we shifted to it being our turn to administer that.
Right, but our income and grants is 106,000, 107,000, and then
Yeah.
we're sending out 152.
So we have to put our share, so we get CBT, West Kootenai boundary, East Kootenai and Central Kootenai money.
Okay.
So possibly 1/4 of the total is in our contribution, which normally might have gone somewhere else. I'm not dead certain on that, but I think that's what's happened with it.
Okay, I think you're correct.
I have to find
No,
out.
listen, thank you for that. It just doesn't, we don't have little notes off to the side that tells us what's going on. But because you said that we could talk about other things outside of our subregion right now, which S105 is an example of, I would have 2 questions of clarity for my for those of you that are here today. That is, if there's an item or 2 that'll come up in the budget tomorrow that I don't agree with, if I vote for, I'm voting for. If I vote against, so I'll be more specific. I'm not in favor of the additional emergency personnel coordinator, not until we have the regulation come down from the province that specifies what the emergency acts is gonna actually ask for. That's one of the items. And the other one is I'm still struggling with the GIS cost because I have not got the information that I've asked for. And if I don't get the information, I can't support those 2 items. So that means that I'll be voting against the budget tomorrow.
So, Chair, if I might, I may have misspoken. When I said we, I guess it should have been, it's the royal we. Any director can send the CEO and the CFO an email with a motion to change, my understanding. You can send a motion to change funding on any service. It's my understanding. There's already about a dozen, I was told, as of this morning, that are lined up as individual motions to amend. It's Creston Valley Services Committee, we wouldn't vote and put something forward, but we have the opportunity to make our thoughts heard, I understand, on any service still by email, and that could be run through as a, yes or no. The one that you just spoke to is already on the agenda.
Which one?
The additional Nelson-based personnel. Yeah, so it's already on the agenda. So you wouldn't be voting for or against the budget right away. All of those votes that will impact the budget, all of those items will be run through prior to us getting to the actual final vote of the budget. Whether or not you support the final budget or not, entirely your decision.
Okay.
But we'll have run through all those other ones in advance. If we did agenda prep, they weren't all ordered that way initially, but now they are. And all the other recommendations, motions, and directors are putting forward right now, they will all be covered before we get to the bottom line of the budget.
And thank you. Are they currently on an updated format on eScribe? I can understand what that lineup of motions is.
CFO, have you released that? Sorry, Chair. Through the chair.
Through the chair, it'll be on eScribe tonight after we add in the recommendations from this meeting. So yeah, there will be somewhere between 10 and 20, 12 and 20 that I'm aware of.
Thank you, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, for taking this a little bit sideways, but I still feel like a newbie and I have to ask these questions because sometimes I just don't get the process, the proper process.
Go ahead, yeah.
And through the chair, if I may, the previous discussion regarding S-105 community sustainability in the contract. I just
Yes.
looked in the budget, so the 120,000 of that 152 is for its KLP, which I believe would be the Kootenai Lake Partnership.
What? You like partnership?
Yeah,
120, so the grant we received is the wrong one, I'm not thinking of the right. So is that a real estate foundation grant that we're receiving to update the, cultural values study? I had the wrong one in mind, but that might be what that is. There's a real estate foundation grant to update the cultural value study, which we would hold its money in, and then we would contract that out. So I was thinking of the wrong allocation, like it's money from outside that we flow through. It costs us a little extra because we are doing work in the process.
So for KLP, we have flow through money of $120,000.
Sounds like it. That'll be real estate foundation grant funding, I would assume.
I don't know what that means.
There-
That's a lot of money flowing through to KLP. And it's a grant, our taxpayers aren't paying that. Well, our local taxpayers aren't paying that.
Go ahead, yeah.
through the chair, I'm looking at the budget. I can't tell exactly, but there's I think the large portion of it is funded by grants, and there will be an amount that will be funded by taxpayers, but I would have to get those details and get them to you after the meeting.
Thank you, Yev, and yes.
Okay, before we adjourn this meeting, we have an observer and we have time for a question period. I'm just wondering if our observer has a question. Hearing none, I would then entertain a motion to adjourn. Director Vanberg, we are adjourned and we will all gather again tomorrow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
And Joe, Craig, and Yev.
See you guys.
Yeah, thanks for meeting. We'll see you all tomorrow.